Hello students, I am Dr. Saleha Jamal, Faculty Department of Geography, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. So, in week 2, we are here to discuss again from the spheres of the earth, that is hydrosphere. That is today's topic of discussion. When we talk about the hydrosphere, we know that is something related, we are talking about the water. So, when we talk about this hydrosphere, means the whole amount of water on the earth can be referred to as hydrosphere in whatever state it is, whether it is in the state of liquid, that is water, or in the state of solid, that may be the ice, or in the state of gaseous, that may be the water vapor. So, the whole amount of water on the earth can be referred as hydrosphere. The hydrosphere includes all types of waters and reservoirs that are present on this planet Earth. That can be seen if we see the presence of water in atmosphere, that can be seen in terms of the clouds and water vapor, and if we see below the surface, the presence of water in terms of the groundwater. If we talk about the surface, the presence of water in terms of the oceans, rivers and lakes. So, these all types of waters and reservoirs that are present can be termed together as the hydrosphere. So, these elements, all these elements, whether we are talking about the presence of water from the atmosphere or the presence of water from the groundwater or from the oceans, rivers, lakes, these work together and somewhat these are combined in a very much important linked system that it controls climate and influences various geological and ecological processes. So, this figure shows the global distribution of water. So, it is very much clear from this figure. If we talk about, the ocean contributes 97% of the water that is present on the planet Earth, while we have only 3% of fresh water, mainly on which we are dependent for the drinking, washing, for the agriculture purpose, etc. So, the usable water, that is the fresh water, that is 3%. If we talk about again from this 3%, 79% of water is derived from the ice caps and glacier, and only we can say the accessible surface fresh water is just 1%, while groundwater is about 20%. So, out of this 3%, the major water where we can use accessible surface water is just only 1%, while from the groundwater that is the 20%. So, you can see how although we are having the 3/4, we can say the part of the earth is covered with water, but from that we are having only 3% the fresh water out of 100% of water availability, and from that to 3% that water accessible from the surface fresh water, that is only 1%, while from the ground that is the 20%. There are different components of the hydrosphere. If we talk about the different components of the hydrosphere, the first very important component are the oceans, rivers and lakes, glaciers and ice caps, and the groundwater. So, discussing about the different components of the hydrosphere, first we will talk about the ocean. We know oceans has a vast coverage, and we can talk about the oceans like Pacific Oceans, Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. It has a vast coverage and it contributes 97% of the Earth's total water and 71% of the planet's surface. So, just you can imagine how vast coverage the ocean water is. We know its characteristic. The ocean water is saline water, that's why it is not used for drinking purpose or for the agriculture purpose, etc. But it plays a very important role in regulating the global climate through heat absorption, through storage. It is one of the most important, we can say, carbon sink of this planet Earth. It also helps in redistribution of temperature through the ocean currents. Ocean currents have immense importance in redistribution of temperature in different places, because we have warm ocean currents, cold ocean currents. Warm ocean currents have the warming effect, while cold ocean currents have the cooling effects to different places. So although it is saline water, but these oceans play a very important role in regulating global climate. Role in life, if we talk about their role in the life, we know that the oceans are the home of diverse ecosystem, mainly for it provide habitat for the aquatic organism. It supports the marine life and influences weather through the evaporation and precipitation, and plays a very important role in hydrological cycle also. Talking about the second component, very important component of the atmosphere, that is the rivers and the lakes. Rivers and the lakes generally provide the fresh water, and they are regarded as the fresh water system, and it just account a very small percentage of the earth's water, just 0.3%, and mainly used for the purpose of drinking water, agriculture, industries, etc. It has a dynamic nature, and it is regarded as one of the medium for transport of water, nutrient, sediments across the different landscape. Not only this, these rivers and lakes shapes different landforms. You must have already studied about the different lands. It forms some of the depositional landforms like alluvial fans. It forms various erosional landforms like different types of valleys, we can say potholes, etc. Not only this, rivers and lakes play a very important role in replenishing fresh water supply, and it acts as a reservoir that regulate local climate, the microclimate of a place, and also support the aquatic ecosystem. The third important component of the hydrosphere is glaciers and ice cap. Talking about the glaciers and ice cap, it is a form of water in the solid form, that is frozen water, and it store around 68.7% of the earth's fresh water in frozen form, mainly in the polar regions or at high altitude areas where the temperature is low. If we talk about it, is one of the very important climatic indicators, because their melting shows the rate of rise of global temperature, and which has a direct impact on the sea levels and the freshwater availability. Another important component of the atmosphere is groundwater. Groundwater, that is subsurface water. Groundwater is generally found in aquifers below the earth's surface, and 30% of the earth's fresh water, and it is trapped through various means, mainly used for the drinking purpose, agriculture purposes, and the industrial purposes. Although this groundwater is a sustainable resource, and it is very one of the important and essential resource, but over extraction of this resource and contamination of groundwater can surely lead to depletion and reduced availability and quality of the resource, mainly in the arid regions. We have heard a lot about the scarcity of water in different places, mainly in the urban areas. If we talk about in India, we can have heard various news of water scarcity from the urban areas like Bengaluru, Delhi, Mumbai, etc. Another important component of the hydrosphere is water vapor, that is water in state of gaseous forms. On an average, the atmosphere contains 2 to 3% of the water vapors, and it plays a very important role in the formation of clouds. It plays a very important role in weather and climate, as it has the ability to trap heat, so it contributes to the greenhouse effect and in turn to the global warming, and it also play a very important role in precipitation patterns. So water vapor is also a very important component of the hydrosphere. So we have seen the oceans, The freshwater systems, that is rivers and lakes, water in frozen form, and water in gaseous form, that is water vapor. These are the different components of the hydrosphere. Now, when we study about the hydrosphere, how can we forget to discuss about the water cycle, which is also known as hydrological cycle, and what are the importance of this hydrological cycle? So, actually the hydrological cycle is the continuous movement. We can see here the continuous movement of water within the earth and the atmosphere. The movement of water which takes place within the atmosphere and on the ground surface, the continuous movement within the earth and its atmosphere, that is termed as hydrological cycle. It regulates the availability of water, which in turn affects the climate, weather and ecosystems of planet Earth. There are various processes are involved in fulfilling or in completing the hydrological cycle, such as evaporation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration. Also after infiltration, we have the percolation also. So these are the several processes which play a very important role in completing the water cycle, that is hydrological cycle, and which ensures the constant recycling of water between the different reservoirs of the earth, that is ocean, river, lakes, glaciers, groundwater and the atmosphere. So here we can see the water cycle where the evaporation takes place. Here you can see the evaporation is taking place from the ground, from the lakes, from the streams and from the ocean. Then evaporation from the plants, which is termed as transpiration, you can see also taking place. So evaporation from the ocean, lake, streams, ground and evaporation from the plants, which is known as transpiration, is taking place, after which it condenses. Condensation takes place, that is the next steps is condensation, and which causes precipitation, that is the receipt of the water in different forms. That may be in form of the water droplets, that is rain, that may be in form of the sleet, that may be in form of the hail, groupel, etc. When this water or precipitation is received by the earth, some of the water that goes as a surface runoff, and some of the water infiltrate and percolates and goes as a groundwater. So thus it completes a whole water cycle, that is known as hydrological cycle. So there are different processes I have talked about, like evaporation, condensation, precipitation and runoff, which completes the hydrological cycle. During the evaporation generally takes place when the water from the oceans, lakes, rivers and ground surface evaporates to the atmosphere and converts into the water vapor. So here you can see the water from the oceans, lakes, rivers, ground surface that evaporates to the atmosphere and converted into the water vapor, and this conversion occurs when the temperature is very much high. The water molecules cannot retain its states and it is converted into the gaseous state. After this, condensation process takes place, that is water vapor rises to the atmosphere, then cooling takes place, and after this it condenses into tiny droplets, forming different types of precipitation. In terms of the, we can say, we can found these droplets in clouds, fog, dew, etc. During this condensation, we see it occurs generally when the air reaches its dew point, temperature at which the air becomes saturated with water vapor and can no longer hold any more moisture, then it is said as dew point. So here in condensation process, water vapor rises to the atmosphere, cooling takes place and it condenses into tiny droplets, forming various types of clouds, fog, dew, etc. After this, precipitation process takes place where these clouds become saturated with the water droplets falls as precipitation, and that may take any form, maybe in form of rain, sleet, hail, graupel, etc. After this precipitation, when the water is received on the ground, runoff process takes place where the precipitation reaches the ground and flows over the surface as runoff or infiltrate. So runoff can collect. What is the significance of runoff? This runoff can collect in low-lying areas and can flow in streams, river, lakes, and eventually at last returning to the ocean. So here you can see a whole cycle is maintained. First, evaporation takes place from different sources, that may be the oceans, lakes, rivers, ground surface or plants, and then here condensation takes place and cloud formation, fog, dew are formed. Then the precipitation takes place and water is received on the ground, and then surface runoff take place. So overall it completes one whole cycle. Discussing some of the concept here, that when after the runoff, infiltration takes place. The runoff flows over the ground and some of the water seeps into the soil, that further becomes the groundwater, and the infiltrated water can feed plants, even can recharge aquifers and can maintain the water level, underground water level, and also seep into the streams and the river. And in percolation, once the water moves downward through the soil layers, it becomes the part of the groundwater. So one of the concept which you should be very clear about, that is the transpiration. Transpiration is also the evaporation that takes place from the plants. Plants generally release water into the air as water vapor through the process that is known as transpiration, and which is very much important for the water cycle. At it, plants takes water, absorbs water from the soil and returns back through the transpiration to the atmosphere. That's why it is important part of the water cycle. And when the term evapotranspiration comes, evapotranspiration is a combined term for the evaporation that takes place from the ocean, lakes, ground, and transpiration, that evaporation takes place from the plants, that is release of water vapor to the atmosphere by the plants. So the combined term of evaporation and transpiration can be termed as evapotranspiration. So what are the impact of these processes on weather and climate? The processes which we discussed here, that is evaporation, condensation, precipitation and infiltration. When we talk about the evaporation, evaporation helps to cool the surface of the earth because it absorbs heat during the phase of change from liquid to vapor. When the liquid state changes to vapor state, it absorbs heat, and when it absorbs heat, cooling effects can be seen. Simple example you must have observed in day-to-day routine life. When we sweat and when we come under the fan or in cool situation like in AC, when the sweating evaporates, then we feel cool. Means the evaporation causes cooling effects. Thus, evaporation helps to cool the surface of the earth. So, it has an impact of cooling impact for the surface of the earth by absorbing heat. Similarly, if we talk about condensation, during the condensation, we see that latent heat is released in the atmosphere, and this latent heat of condensation drives various atmospheric circulation and also influences the weather patterns. The clouds formed can either trap heat or can reflect light. During condensation, we have seen the clouds are formed, the fog, or we can say dew is formed. So these cloud, fog, dew, what it does, it reflects the sunlight, and also it traps heat. It also traps the outgoing waves, outgoing long waves. It traps heat. So on one hand, it reflects the sunlight incoming rays. On the other hand, it traps the outgoing rays, therefore affecting the different weather patterns at different places differently. When we talk about the third process, that is the precipitation, it plays a very important role in determining the climate zone, whether it is arid, semi-arid, humid, subhumid, etc. And we know that consistent rainfall support diverse ecosystem, while arid regions face challenges which directly or indirectly affects the local weather. Another process, that is infiltration. We know that if there is healthy infiltration, the groundwater recharging will take place. It will help to maintain the stable groundwater levels, which will further support growth of plants, which in turn will affect the local climate. So all these processes are somewhat, we can say, interlinked system which regulates the different phenomena of the planet Earth. So the importance of these processes and the hydrological cycle and water can be seen here through the climatic charts, temperature and water currents. If we take example how the water currents impacts the temperature, we know there are two types of current: warm current, cold current. Warm currents are generated in the tropics near the equator, while the cold currents are formed in high altitude or in the poles. So if we talk about on the western coast, here you can see western coast of the continents like California and Peru current. You can see here California and Peru current. So these cold currents bring cool air and create arid climates. When we talk about, you can see here, this one is California I am talking about, and this one is what? This one is Peru current. So these are the cold currents and it causes arid condition. How it causes arid condition? Because we know cold current means temperature will be low, pressure will be high, and when the pressure will be high, it will not invite moisture laden winds towards it, thus causing the arid conditions in the coastal areas. So thus it impacts the global climate. If we talk about the eastern coast, opposite to this, eastern coast of the continents, the warm currents like the Gulf Stream, Kuroshio current, it raises the temperature leading to the warmer and humid condition. For example, here you can see Gulf Stream on the eastern coast. Here you can see Gulf Stream on the eastern coast, means it takes warm water from the tropics to the western part of the Europe. Means this Gulf Stream takes warm water to the European side. You can see to the European side. It takes warm water to the European side, thus causing warming effect. At similar latitude, same latitude inside the continent, extreme low temperature which is not very conducive of the human settlement. That's why we can see that most of the population is concentrated towards the Western European side, having a comfortable climate for the human settlement. Thus you can see here how this warm currents causes the warming effect to the Western European region. Similarly, we can have the another example of Kuroshio current. Kuroshio current again is the eastern coast region, you can see, of this continent. It takes water from the tropics, from the equator, the warm water towards the higher latitude, that's causing the warming effect. So you can just imagine how this ocean currents play a very important role in cooling and warming. Then the polar regions, there are other examples for the Labrador current, cool coastal areas. For example, here again you can find the Labrador current. This Labrador current, this is coming from the higher latitude. So this will have, as it coming from the higher latitudes towards the lower latitude, so it will provide the cooling effect. And where this warm current, that is the Gulf Stream, and the cool current, the Labrador currents meets, the fog formation takes place. So another we can say climatic impact, fog formation. Then at equatorial region, warm equatorial currents increases temperature because these are the warm currents which increases the temperature affecting the tropical climate. Similarly, the coastal deserts, cold currents like Humboldt current reduce evaporation leading to dry coastal regions like Atacama Desert. If we talk about the Humboldt current, there are different currents. Mostly what we see in the subtropical high pressure belt or subtropical areas, most of the deserts are generally formed in these regions. Most of the deserts are generally formed in these regions. Why most of the deserts are formed in these regions? Because one of the important reason is this, that it is a subtropical high pressure belt, that is area of subsidence of air where stability occurs, and we can find that most of the cold currents are found on the western parts of the continents like Peru current, here the Benguela current, here the West Australian current. Due to these cold currents, temperature lowers down, pressure become higher, and when the pressure is high, it will not invite moisture-laden wind, thus it forms the deserts in the western parts of the continents. Thus, these water bodies play a very important role in the regulating the climate of different places, and which can be very much visible through this global climatic chart. Students, see this global climatic chart and you can analyze and interpret how this impacts, how this water bodies impacts the climate of different places in different months. The climatic charts are given for the January month, March month and June, and further the September month. So you can see here and you can interpret it how this impact the global climate. Now, significance of hydrological cycle. We know that water is very much important because it sustains life, and there is a phrase also, save water, it will save you. So, it is very much important component of the planet Earth, without which the life on the Earth is not possible. And because of the presence of water and the homosphere of the atmosphere, the planet Earth is one of the unique planet and very important planet for sustaining life. Not only this, the hydrological cycle regulate the climate because different processes we have seen, the evaporation, condensation, precipitation, which all involves in completing the hydrological cycle, and in one way or the other way it regulates the climate. It also, hydrological cycle also ensures the availability of the water for the ecosystems and for the use of the human beings. Not only this, it plays a very important role for ecological, atmospheric and geological and economic aspect. Not only this, there is many aquatic systems, many wetlands, many water bodies supports livelihoods of millions of people who are residing nearby it. The hydrological cycle regulates climate by moderating the temperatures. Already we have seen through the example of Gulf Stream, Kuroshio current, and it influences the weather patterns through water vapors and greenhouse effect. Thus, it has a significance of hydrological cycle. So, a bit detail of which we know that water ability is very much important for the ecosystem and life, and water is important to sustain life because it ensures the continuous circulation of water between the earth's surface and atmosphere and underground reservoirs, making water available for plants, animals and the humans. It not only this, it also ensures the ecosystem health. The freshwater ecosystems like rivers, wetlands, lakes, which rely on the hydrological cycle to maintain the water level in order to support the biodiversity, the aquatic life and provide habitat for the aquatic species. Thus, the water also maintains the ecosystem health. Not only this, water, already we have discussed that water plays very important role in climate regulation. It controls temperature because it acts as a greenhouse gas. It traps heat. Various processes like evaporation, condensation and precipitation is related to the water. It also moderates the regional climates. For example, we have seen the example of Kuroshio currents, we have seen the examples of Gulf Stream, we can see the examples which the phenomena takes place, the land breeze and sea breeze, we can say the formation of clouds, rainfall also helps to balance the local and the regional temperature. Thus, it plays a very important role in climate regulation. Not only this, it also drives climate and weather pattern of different places by the formation of clouds and precipitation and by rainfall distribution, because based on these rainfall distributions, the regions are then classified into arid, semi-arid, or we can say humid, subhumid, influencing the ecosystem. And regarding this differential distribution of the precipitation, we can have different types of ecosystem, we can have different agriculture, and we can see the differences in the human settlements. It also drives the climate and weather patterns, you can see in terms of the storms and the hurricanes, because the movement of water vapor through the atmosphere can lead to the formation of extreme weather events such as hurricanes and thunderstorms, which play a role in redistribution of heat and moisture across the planet. It also plays a very important role in groundwater recharge and freshwater supplies, because the water cycle replenishes groundwater through the infiltration process, through the percolation process. The water is allowed to seep into the soil and it recharges the aquifers, thus maintaining the underground water level, which is one of the major source of drinking water and irrigation. Not only this, the hydrological cycle maintains the fresh water resources through the precipitation and water cycle. The sources like lakes, rivers and reservoirs, which are very much essential for human consumption, irrigation, industrial use and sustaining the natural system. The water also supports agricultural productivity based upon the availability of the water. There are different types of agriculture, there are different types of natural vegetation. We can see the impact of irrigation and crop growth, and nowadays we can see as we deal with the HYV seed, high yield variety seeds, which cannot give a good production without irrigation. So rainfall from the water cycle provide necessary hydration not only to the crops, but it recharges the groundwater and surface water, which is tapped for the irrigation purpose. So it is very important for providing the food security, because areas with insufficient rainfall, that is the arid areas, face various challenges in the food production. It is also very much helpful in providing soil moisture and nutrient distribution, because the movement of water through the soil distributes nutrients that are vital for the crops and the natural vegetation. Last, I can say it helps in the mitigating environmental extremes like wetlands and the other natural bodies. These act as a buffer and it absorbs excess of rainwater during the floods and releases it slowly, thus reducing the flood risk. Nowadays, we are hearing a lot of news about the urban floods. What we do, why it occurs? Because in urbanization, we concretize the surface, means we reduce the soaking capacity of the ground by concretizing the surface, and on the other hand, we are reducing the water storage capacity through the loss of the water bodies. So it is but obvious, whatever precipitation or water we get in form of the rainfall, that will be lost through the surface runoff. That's why these wetlands and other natural bodies which act as a buffer, that absorbs excess of rainwater during the flood situation and releases it slowly, thus reducing the flood risk. The groundwater reserves, lakes, store water during the wet periods, and when it is available during the droughts, and ensuring the stable supply of water during the dry season. It also helps in heat distribution. We know that movement of water, vapor and ocean currents in the water cycle helps to distribute heat globally, reducing extreme temperature differences between the regions. So at last, I would like to finish with a phrase, save water, it will save you. So these are the references for the further reading. Thank you.